Scott, it's great to have you back on the MedTech Unboxed podcast.
Yeah, thanks for having me back, Steve. Yeah, great to see you again.
Absolutely. Yeah, I think October of last year we spoke and we had a very interesting podcast. You gave us an overview of IVL, the progress that FastWave is making, clinical updates. And so I thought I'd have you back on for some updates because, medical kind of moves slow, but it seems like not in IVL, there's just a lot going on and it's hard to keep up with it. So you're the perfect person to give us an update.
Yeah, no doubt. Yeah, it's normally not typical, right, to do maybe an update call within the year, but yeah, IVL is a bit unique in that capacity. But yeah, happy to kind of provide the latest on the market and tell you a little bit more about maybe where FastWave is and how maybe we fit within that kind of the broader ecosystem. But as most people listening to this probably know, J&J pulled the trigger on Shockwave I think that deal officially closed in Q2 of 24. We're recording this in mid 25. And so that was a monster deal in and of itself. And then even most recently in Q1 of this year, and I think the deal closed maybe in Q1 as well, but Boston Scientific acquired Bolt Medical. And Boston had been a long-term equity holder in the company. So not a huge surprise that they did decide to pull the proverbial trigger on Bolt Medical, but really kind of to even step back, Bolt was sort of a spin out of Boston Scientific in their early years. A lot of that skunk works type of R&D, really more R related effort was in Maple Grove, actually, where Boston Scientific's cardiovascular business is really based. Since then, Bolt had moved to Southern California, and rightfully so. There's a lot of optical talent in the area, in Southern California specifically. So anyway, coming full circle on that particular acquisition, not a surprise that Boston Scientific pulled the trigger, but it was a pretty big number, right? I mean, it was $900 million all in. I think what's maybe more interesting about that deal is it was very early. I mean, most cardiovascular M&A deals are early in and of themselves, but this was particularly early because at the time of acquisition, or at the time that deal was announced, Bolt had submitted for their 510K clearance for above the knee applications. They had not yet received clearance; they just had submitted for it. And then in addition, they had IDE approval for their coronary pivotal trial. And when you look at both of those kind of areas, right? Kind of their work in the periphery as well as their work in the coronary, they had not, to our knowledge, they had not done a single patient yet, or treated a single patient from a clinical perspective at the time of that acquisition in the U.S. anyway, right? All of their activity had been OUS, and so again, very early, but I would say especially early, considering the size of that transaction, right? With $900 million all in. I think about 2/3 of it was up front, with another 2/3 in regulatory milestones. So to our understanding, no commercial milestones or earnouts associated with that. So yeah, it was a great comparable, right, for FastWave, as well as another IVL startup in the space too.
Yeah, that tells you a lot. How soon they took it to the next stage, right?
Mm-hmm. Yeah. I mean, they clearly saw that as an inflection point, and I think, look at Boston's performance. I mean, credit to their team. I mean, who would have expected back in 2009, 2010 that their market cap would reach these types of levels? So maybe most people would say, geez, was that a mistake? Did they come in too early, et cetera? But clearly it's a smart team, and they've proven a lot, right, over the past decade or so. And so I think they obviously saw it as an inflection point to sort of like really sink their teeth into Bolt. So, credit to the Bolt team as well, right, for getting to that stage. They're obviously developing a laser-based system, different than our laser IVL platform. But I can say firsthand, it's no small feat to get to that stage with a laser-based energy platform. These systems aren't for the faint of heart to develop, and so credit to their team for getting as far as they have.
Right. On that note about how enthusiastic we all are about IVL, can you share with us some of the metrics? Like, the CAGR and potential market 10 years? Any metrics that you might have? I'm sure you have some.
Yeah. At a high level, I mean, granted, this is all forecasting, right? As we all know, but
Analysts.
yeah. So I like to. I can't remember exactly where I heard this phrase, but it was something along the lines of, the best magic tricks happen inside an Excel spreadsheet, So, but with that said, I mean, it's very clear that the adoption of IVL is growing the adoption rate, I would say, is growing quite rapidly. In fact, we hosted a dinner at the CVI conference a couple weeks ago in Austin, which is a bit of a mashup between structural heart docs, pure play coronary interventionalists, and then peripheral physicians. So it's kind of a unique conference in that sense. But we hosted a dinner there, and one of the high volume PCI operators that I was sitting next to had mentioned that the toothpaste is out of the tube with respect to IVL. It's not really, the adoption rate is not really going to slow down or ease off, right? Because it's so simple to use. It's incredibly safe. It works well when other tools kind of struggle, right? In the with respect to calcium modification. So adoption rate has increased quite rapidly. I think if you look at most market models, the rate is kind of in the neighborhood of 10 to 15% of all PCIs are utilizing IVL. If you talk to the high volume PCI operators, they would actually say it's quite higher than that. It's probably more so in the neighborhood of maybe even 20 to 25% right now. Let's just ballpark it at kind of, let's 20% roughly of all PCIs are utilizing IVL. It's probably going to continue to increase, right? When you look at kind of top line numbers, I think most forecasts point to by the end of this decade, so 2030, IVL revenues approaching kind of 1.5 to 2 billion. Right. So I think that's arguably a little bit conservative, kind of based on Shockwave's run rate before they were acquired by J&J. And so, again, net is that like really, really healthy revenue, largely because of reimbursement. And I think and maybe we can touch on this in a little bit more detail with some changes in the peripheral reimbursement landscape. I think the adoption probably will continue to increase, because when you look at Shockwave's revenue historically, roughly about 80% of it was driven from PCIs, from their coronary SKUs. So, and then when you look at the other kind of, let's call it 20 to low kind of 22, 23%, was peripheral. But of that segment, that peripheral segment, a lot of it was large bore access, structural heart cases where IVL was being used to open up access, right, to get in a TAVR device or something like that. And so, as reimbursement begins to change for, I would say, more common, FemPop below the knee lesions, you could really begin to kind of see the adoption and overall growth really accelerating at that point.
Yeah. Oh, thanks for sharing that. That's very exciting. Yeah. So, another from a FastWave tech platform standpoint, there's a lot going on, and I thought it'd be great if you can kind of give us an update. I have a little visual or video that we can share. If you want me to share that now, you can kind of just go through SOLA.
Yeah. SOLA is the name of our coronary system. I guess before you hit play on that, just to level set the audience,
right?
One of the unique things about our journey at FastWave is we're developing two different IVL systems in parallel. One is our we call it the Artero platform. It's an electric or kind of electric discharge based mechanism. So fairly similar to Shockwave in that regard. Very different way in which we're creating discharges that then result in shock waves or sonic pressure within the balloon. But that's our peripheral system. And then SOLA, as you mentioned, is our coronary system, which is a laser based platform. A different laser source than Bolt by intention. And I can maybe explain that here in a little bit more detail once you pull up this video.
Great.
And while you're pulling it up, we'll get to it here. I guess, you got it up here. So one of the more unique things about this platform is it's a single emitter design. And I guess before you hit the play button, that's the single emitter design. And what's really important about that feature is that with Shockwave and even with Bolt's platform as an example, you have these static or these stationary emitters that are longitudinally spaced throughout the balloon. you need that sort of with a electric discharge based platform like Shockwave, and even with our peripheral system, you need that that as well. But Bolt, interesting enough, has kind of the same look and feel, and the reason for that is the laser source that they chose requires a stationary target or a mechanical target to hit in order to generate cavitation, and so that's why when you look at kind of Bolt's balloon, it kind of looks like a Shockwave balloon. And to come full circle on the comment where I'm going with this is that when you have to kind of space these emitters and fixate them and space them longitudinally throughout the balloon, you're always dealing with this trade-off with respect to crossing profile. So as you develop longer balloons, you have to add more emitters, which then adds to increases the crossing profile, adds to the kind of the overall stiffness or unflexibility of the balloon itself. And so when we first started developing Sola, we wanted to really try to design something that could overcome that constraint, right? And that's where we landed with this the single emitter design that allows us that allows us to basically bypass that constraint, because as we develop longer balloons, it's the same crossing profile, regardless of the length. And so, yeah, feel free to go ahead and play the button, because
that's a great point. Yeah, so lower crossing profile, better, more flexibility, reaching more tortuous anatomy.
Yeah, exactly. And so that's important in the periphery, but even more important in the coronaries, right? Because you're dealing with even smaller vessels, right? Anywhere from 1.5 millimeters to maybe 4 millimeters on the high side. And oftentimes with complex, calcified disease of the coronaries, you're dealing with a lot of tortuosity, much more sort of exacerbated than the periphery. And so that clinical need is paramount, right? When you're dealing with that anatomy. And so that's why we're really, really excited about this design, and really that feature of allowing us to kind of overcome those kind of engineering constraints to develop a very, very sleek crossable balloon.
That's a good point. The unmet need there's bulky, right? Some of these predicate devices, right? So low profile, more flexibility. All right, I'll play this video, and if you can kind of walk us through, that'd be great.
Yeah. Yep. So you've got this single emitter design, and the user actually at the handle level controls that emitter. So the user can slide or move or translate that, distal and proximal from shoulder to shoulder of the balloon. So not only does it allow us to develop a very sleek kind of balloon with a low crossing profile, but the interventionalist in our case, while keeping the balloon up, can simply move the fiber exactly, or the optical fiber or optical emitter exactly where they want to place it to deliver the energy, versus having to deflate the balloon, reposition it, and then inflate the balloon, right? Which is kind of, it's pretty problematic with Shockwave right now. And so with this design, it's a longer length balloon. It's twice the length of our longest version is twice the length of Shockwave, and so an interventional cardiologist can keep this balloon up and simply move the optical emitter distal and proximal as they see fit. So that's kind of the major kind of novelty in this design at a high level. There's a couple other interesting points as this video kind of continues to play. With Shockwave's design, the way in which they deliver energy, I would say it's kind of directional from a cross section perspective. Mm-hmm. So if you think about the clock of a vessel, or the clock being the circumference of the vessel, depending on where their emitters are positioned, you kind of get this this 180 degree firing kind of field, if you will, right? So think about if the emitters are placed at 12 and 6 or 3 and 9 on the clock, that's where your acoustic field or your sonic pressure is kind of delivered. Whereas with this design, because of the laser source that we chose, each and every pulse delivers true 360 degree energy, and we're pretty excited about that playing out clinically, because that's another challenge with calcification in the arteries, that not all of it's concentric. Not all of it is has that 270 or 360 degree arc. There's a lot of eccentric or nodular calcium that is kind of positioned at 12 o'clock to 3 o'clock. Window, kind of going back to that analogy. And so the ideal scenario is you want your energy to be almost like surround sound, right? Think about the surround sound in your living room. You don't want the speakers to be firing off in one corner. It's a much better experience, right? If the surround sound is truly kind of 360 degrees. And so that's what we're attempting to do with this design as well, is allow it gives the user a little bit more predictability, right? With respect to modifying calcium with each and every pulse.
Okay. Yeah. Good point. More uniform delivery of the energy.
Yeah, you got it.
Gotcha.
Yeah, you got it. That's exactly what we're after here with this system. So yeah, at a high, kind of zooming out, it's a what we think is a much more crossable deliverable balloon, which is probably the biggest single need here for coronary applications. And then in addition, the ability to pulse faster. We're pulsing at about 5 times as faster than shockwave, while delivering more uniform energy circumferentially within the balloon. So yeah, I mean, we think it's a pretty promising system.
Yeah, excellent. Thanks for sharing that. Very interesting.
Yeah, and it was cool to see that play out, because we just we're recording this here in kind of early mid Q3 here, but we just commenced a feasibility study with this system, and so got to see it firsthand. I mean, these are always pretty rewarding experiences, right? As you know, working on a platform for I guess a little over 4 years now, to see it come to life and treating patients is pretty cool.
That's a good segue. I was going to ask you for any clinical updates or milestones, if you can share that.
Yeah, since we're on the topic of this, this system, in late May, we enrolled the first 9 patients in a coronary feasibility study. The design of the study itself, we believe, is going to be somewhat mirrored off of a mirror of our future U.S. IDE pivotal trial. But this particular feasibility study will enroll up to 30 patients. So we enrolled the first 9. We hope to complete enrollment by the end of Q3 here, possibly early Q4. But enrollment doesn't seem to be a challenge with the sites that we selected for this particular feasibility study. So once we wrap that up, and that data will be core lab adjudicated as well. So it'll be we feel pretty good about kind of the way in which we're conducting the study in preparation for that pivotal that U.S. pivotal trial, which at this point in time we hope to start first half of next year here in the U.S. Yeah, and then on the peripheral side, which was the other IVL platform we're developing that we're calling Artero. That is we're just on the precipice of submitting for IDE approval for that U.S. pivotal trial. So that's a 510(k) device, but it's a clinical 510(k). And so need to conduct a study here in the U.S., but it's relatively small study that we expect to enroll quite quickly. Yeah, but we're very close to getting that started as well. So that'll be a lot of clinical work ahead, both across the peripheral anatomy as well as the coronary space.
All this the clinicals and all this development requires funding. Are there any funding updates you can provide?
Yeah. So we've closed a few different tranches of capital right over the past couple of years, even most recently earlier this year, and aiming to have our next larger round of capital complete by the end of this year. That will be used to kind of fund the remaining. It'll be used to fund the full peripheral pivotal trial, and then allow us to commence that coronary pivotal trial. Call it around midpoint next year.
Yeah. Okay. Scott, this has been great. I appreciate it. Like I said, it's been 10 months and we might have to go back 10 months from now and do it again, but
I was just going to say we might have to do it even sooner, right? Maybe another 6 months. Yeah. But
exactly.
Definitely excited about kind of the progress we're making. And we feel, we're kind of just like most startups, we're running the company as if we're going to, go the distance. But as you know, and as well as a lot of people that are probably listening to this, the strategic interest in IVL is quite high. Nice. And so that's always a good position, right? To have kind of optionality, right? We can, keep going, or if the interest is high, we obviously want to do well by our investors as well. So so we'll see kind of how that plays out, over the next 6 to 12 months.
Excellent. Thanks so much, Scott.
Yeah, awesome. Thanks for having me, Steve.
All right. Yep.